Hi there, I'm Rachel Reenstra, and this is my interview with Sacha Stone. Finally, I live in an area that's really difficult to upload long videos. So I have broken this interview with Sacha Stone into 2 videos. This is part 1. And also, not to confuse anybody, I have done interviews with many people around the world. Some of them really happened, some of them didn't. Like my interview with Bill Gates. Love him so much I hate him kind of thing. Yeah. Bill, are you there? Bill? Apparently he's not so good with computers anymore. Invented Microsoft, but can't figure out how to turn on Zoom. Welcome to the show, Bill.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I would like to start with the comments from the president. Let's just go there right away. Because he took something, monoclonal, blah, 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 antibodies, some kind of experimental cocktail. He called it a cure. Now, this is something that you've spent billions of dollars on trying to find, and you rush into the vaccine and all this research, blah, blah, blah. Let's cut to the chase. Is the president trying to cock block your cure?
Yeah, the word cure is inappropriate because it won't work for everyone. But yes, of all the therapeutics, this is the most promising. And so we've been working with the companies doing antibodies. We reserved factory capacity all the way back in the spring. And now we're partnered with Eli Lilly, who with Regeneron has been the fastest to get these antibodies ready.
I got to interrupt you a second.
They could reduce the
death. I feel like you just don't answer the question. It was kind of a yes or no question. Did the president cock block your vaccine cure? Yes or no? It's like you're going off with your hands and, I don't know what kind of spell you're doing, but you're talking over my head.
They could reduce the death rate quite a bit.
I don't think it any lower. 0.001000001 dying of COVID, not with COVID, because I know how those numbers are, right? It's like motorcycle accident and COVID, pneumonia, diabetes, heart failure, COVID. We're questioning that a little bit. So just the CDC numbers that came out and said it was really only 6% that died of solely COVID. Kind of changes the stats a little bit on that death count. You know what I'm saying? I don't know, 250,000 to 9,000, which is really, you look at those numbers and we're talking, you got a bigger chance of poking your eye out with a fork than dying of solely of COVID. Don't mean to interrupt. Keep going. Just keep waving your hands and talking above my head. Just wanted to interject. Oh, not inject. Said interject. Don't get crazy, Bill. We're not up to the injection part because interject, not inject. You can find more of that on brand new Tube, Rachel Reenstra, or Odyssey, Rachel Reenstra, the only platforms that are free speech. Imagine that. What? Rachel, you could say anything. Yeah. Remember that? That was fun. Anyway, the interview I had with Sacha Stone was real. It wasn't fake. And I've had quite a few people that say, oh, is this like one of your funny videos with someone that you pretend to interview them, but it's not really your real interview? No, this one really happened. And God bless him. He was very tired. It was late at night and he had just arrived in America. And he, this is before the Freedom Tour that he just finished. So God bless him for hanging in there, because I was awake and excited to talk to him and ask him the questions I wanted to ask him. And he really rallied. So thank you, Sacha Stone, for hanging in there. And Bill Gates, hopefully one day I will interview you and ask you those questions that I've really, really wanted to be asking. In case you haven't shape-shifted, I don't know. Who knows? I want to get you before you're on trial for crimes against humanity. # Nuremberg Code. Kidding, kind of. Anyway, enjoy this video. And here it is without further ado. I like to build, I like to build up things. I don't just put things out there. I like to introduce them and tease it, wait a while. Oh, just spilled my cucumber water. This is why you don't go on a cucumber cleanse. And it gets all over your phone and great. I swear Bill Gates did this. He heard me and okay. All right. Well, there you go. Enjoy. Oh, the moment I said anything bad about Bill Gates, I spilled my cucumber water. Thank you for coming to America, for doing what you're doing, for being presence in what everyone's going through, and your words have inspired so many people. And
Well, in the first instance, thank you for the kind words, Rachel, and delighted to meet you.
what are you going through right now in this, throwing yourself into the situation that you've thrown yourself into by being a part of this tour and connecting with America?
My condition today is terminal exhaustion.
Yes.
I've crossed the country 3 times in less than a month, and just hightailed it through the Arizona desert today to get to Vegas. But I mean, I'm exhausted at the moment, and I'm
Yep.
coming through a bit of a flu-y thing. But I'm just so happy to be here, and so happy to be connected to the pulse of humanity, which I insist is emerging here in Middle America more than anywhere else in the world.
Yeah. And what have you learned from being amongst Middle America? And was it what you thought, like meeting people face to face and getting that experience?
What I'm learning, the essential piece, is that despite being poisoned, mind, body, and soul for the last 75 years at least in North America, the sheer Christed aspect of humanity is so on point. Just the foundational goodness and decency and humanity is so intact. Now that is what I needed to see, and
Right.
that's what I've already seen. If I were to go back now to my beautiful life in Bali, I would have already achieved what I wanted, which was to come and see for myself that aspect of humanity is intact, despite the fact that this nation, more than any other on earth in the history of this world, has been weaponized, has been saturnized, has been poisoned. Again, mind, body, and soul. And I say this to the audience I'm speaking to, that the food that's been poisoned, the water's poisoned, the air's poisoned, the media is poisonous, the academic, landscape is rotten to the core.
Yep.
The industrial landscape is just desecration. And yet, what is the essence that emerges through the alchemy of this country is the most pointed and beautiful aspect of humanity. That's a success story. And that also means that the proverbial serpent has lost its game, because the kingdom of the devil did not prevail in this land.
So the eye-to-eye contact, the actual getting in touch with people, talking to them, and the few things you've shared on Facebook, and that beautiful woman who has actually been through her own amount of torture.
She's a survivor of serious abuses through ritual Satanism and human trafficking, and she's doing something about it. And she's set up an initiative which she's calling called the Finding Hope Project, and you can find that on www.findinghopeproject.org. And she's resurrecting not only herself but a great many others. So I want you to tell me and my audience, that are a very conscious and kind and loving audience around the world, and I want you to tell them please about your initiative and what it is that you're doing.
Okay. So in 2018, my Aunt Michelle Hoover and I started the Henry Leroy Oscar Call Your Mom campaign to locate her 3 missing sons, Henry, Leroy, and Oscar. She, like me, he was a survivor of satanic ritual abuse, human trafficking, and MK Ultra. And like all these years later, has bravely come forward to raise awareness and reunite our family. I'd like to connect with people as well to just raise as much awareness as possible.
Okay, that's beautiful. Well stated. Thank you for that. And look,
Many things that you have seen in the International Tribunal of Natural Justice, you've heard these stories over and over again, but to see them face to face in a situation like this.
That's a constant theme in my life. Meeting survivors and witnesses and people who come forward. I'm constantly being, in the most beautiful way, accosted by these people who want to give it the brain dump to me and tell me their story and their backstory. So yeah, I'm blessed in that I'm entrusted by a great many survivors and witnesses to fact who come and share with me. There's not a day goes by that I'm not contacted by at least one witness of ritual satanic abuse or pedophilia, Satanism, trafficking, who doesn't contact me and say, if you want, I have a story that I'll lean into your greater narrative. So
I feel like you get energized by the sound, the frequency of the birds, the wind in the trees, the solace of your bare feet, your touching the soil. How are you maintaining that right now?
Well, I'm barefoot. I'm barefoot.
All right.
I stay barefoot. I have a pair of moccasins that were made for me the night before I got on the plane. This wonderful old hippie came and said, "I want to help your tour." He knew I was going to come barefoot. And
Nice.
he made me these moccasins. I confess I've worn them, and I'm grateful for it, especially in the deserts and walking on the hot tarmac at some of the stopovers. I'm very grateful for the fact that I've got a pair of handmade moccasins on.
How are you plugging in right now to recharge your battery right now? Because
I don't make the mistake of taking the adulation or the love or the kindness into myself. I don't make that mistake and allowing that to fuel me, because that's false light. And it's a very dangerous thing. It's why I stepped away from the whole rock and roll theater years ago. In any event, that whole kind of celebrity bullshit. So the very last thing I want to do at this stage in my life is to recreate something which I walked away from over 2 decades ago. But to answer the question, if one is in a state of equanimity, when you're being loved so much by so many people, and I won't deny it, I'm so blessed in that. You know, the other day we were literally in the middle of nowhere. I say the middle of nowhere, in the middle of God's great country.
Right.
We're talking to an audience that were quite literally a few miles away from the center point of America, right in the middle. This is a pretty desolate place. And, you know, a couple of cowboys came up on their horses with their Stetsons, and there was a, you know, flatbed stage had been set up, and there were, I don't know, 300 or 400 people had gathered. And the minute I was announced, and when I got on stage and said something like, you know, I doubt any of you had ever heard of, you know, Humanitat or the New Earth Project or the ITNJ. I hadn't even finished saying it. There was a standing ovation. So in the middle of nowhere, everyone knew the work I'd been doing for 20 odd years. And that was very humbling to know that we're received and heard. They'd also heard of Scott McKay and the Patriot Street Fighters right in the middle of America. You know, we get off the buses anywhere, and we're going to be approached by people who know the work we're doing. So it's a crazy thing. To answer the question, when I'm being loved, I am genuinely sending that straight back out again. And I will lean in 2, 3, 4 hours, 5 hours, nonstop, just talking to people. And I genuinely care. I genuinely want to hear what they're saying. Now, I do get, I'd say 1 out of 5 people are deeply damaged, traumatized, and they're in a state of not psychosis necessarily, but they're neurotic and they are fixated on their own story. And it can become a bit tiresome when people are gushing and they get hold of you and they lock eyes onto you and they don't let you go. And then you've got a 45, 55 people waiting behind them to have a photograph or to have a conversation, say hi. That's hard to navigate. At some point, you've got to almost say, now you've had your piece. Fuck off. But you don't. You love people, and there's a way of navigating that.
Maybe Debbie or one of your assistants can come in and go, he needs to go over here, or he's, you know, you just gave him the virus, so he's got to just, you know, go over there. And
right. Thank you. That's like proteins. Right.
Exactly. You're shedding too much on him. So hold on for a second.
There's the people with a little plaster on the arm you want to watch out for.
Exactly. Where did you get your learning? Now, first of all, your vocabulary is absolutely insane. When I see an interview with you and someone else, it's like you are like the box. And then the person interviewing is like,
Yeah. My mum has, she has a true grasp of Queen's English, and my father as well, actually. They really understand syntax and grammar and proper sentence structure. I don't. I wing it.
Where did it come from? It can't just be you went to school.
That's survival. Sure. I mean, think about it. I grew up in a war for 15, 16 years, and I'm, you know, then I'm effectively a refugee for 9 years and with no standing. And, you know, you have to, no education. Yeah, you know, and I had an education in bush schools in you know, the bush in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, but I have no education to speak of, and no certifications for anything whatsoever. So I had to kind of make it up. Sure, absolutely, you do. It's a survival thing.
I mean, you are a poet, so, and a musician and an artist, so I understand that. But many people have asked, what was your family life like? Like you growing up, we know you went through war in South Africa. What was it like in your family? Did you have sisters and brothers? Were you close with your parents? Were you able to have a relationship with mom and dad where, you know, you hung out or you felt like you could tell them anything?
Well, I never knew my dad until I was 16 or 17. I never met him until then. And now I have a relationship with my dad, and a very affable and affectionate one. We don't see each other often, but he's in England, and you know, there's certainly a very beautiful open heart space there. My mum, who I worship and adore, as every child should, lives in the Algarve in Portugal, and I absolutely adore the woman. She's my favorite human being on the face of the earth. I've always had a very loved. I was a loved child, but fucked up in as much as, you know, just the condition of growing up, you know, behind grenade screens and sometimes being separated from my mother for up to a year at a time because of the war, and constantly wondering if I was ever going to see her again, because I was quite certain that she'd have her head blown off. I mean, she was hanging out of helicopters and doing dangerous frontline shit as a war correspondent, as a news editor, as a, you know, and she was a media person, and kind of hanging with the mercenaries, hanging with the army guys and the Air Force guys. And so she was always, for me as a child, it was like I always thought my mum was going to be killed, and I wasn't going to see her the following, you know, month. But having said that, I was in boarding school, so I would only ever see her every 2 or 3 months anyway for a weekend, and then back to the high security boarding schools. So that wasn't a great way to grow up. But you know, what really matters is our capacity to love and to be loved. And to that extent, I've been very, very blessed. I also come from a family that, in a sense, had money and prestige. And no, I'm not a fucking Rockefeller, for God's sake. I just can't believe the stories going around. The fact is, I come from a privileged family, and it was in its way. I mean, my grandfather was an important man, and you know, so that we wanted for nothing. That's for sure. Until the end of the war, of course, we bloody lost everything. Yeah, and weren't exactly rendered paupers, but you know. So my life anyway, even in the first 15, 16, 17 years, was stark, you know, opposites. And I've been through a lot. I've been through a hell of a lot. And then I did my rock and roll thing, which was really my primal scream. Then the rage did not abate in me. And I did reach a point where I was required to do the contract with the proverbial devil. And I didn't do it. To my credit, I didn't do it. I withdrew, but I knew what that meant. That if I didn't go with that was the end of it. There was no possible way I would get the distribution or the radio play or the MTV play. And I was told starkly to my face at that meeting with the devil, who said, "You will present yourself at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning at such and such an office in Mayfair, and you will sign a contract." And I was given one night to go home and reflect, and I did.
In the middle of a conversation between God and I spoke my mind, but it took all I had. It almost struck me blind. There was a misunderstanding between God and I held out an open hand. I said, "Help me, Lord. It's almost midnight." And God said, "Get ready for sunrise." And God said, "Don't call on me for help. We won't get along if you don't get along with yourself." And it's almost midnight.
decided that night, I didn't go to sleep. I decided I would walk away from my life, which was rock and roll, which I did. Walked away from it, had a bit of a nervous breakdown, I'll confess.
It's almost midnight. Chance would be a fine thing if I could do the right thing.
And went and sat in the North African desert in Morocco, which ended up being a 3-year sojourn, really bouncing between Morocco and Egypt, where I was passionate about pyramidology and the sort of mystical traditions of Islam, which I studied. I had a real sense of foreboding that the world was going to be herded into this kind of civilizational war, clash of civilizations between the Christian, Judeo-Christian mindset and the Islamic mindset. And I was quite prophetic in that. So I started studying Islam, not because I wanted to be a Muslim, and I never became a Muslim, but I wanted to understand it. And I wanted to go and meet with Islamic leaders. I wanted to go and meet with the warlords. I wanted to go and find out for myself who these archetypes were that were supposed to be the wicked, zealous creatures. And, I ended up for some years spending my time in the Middle East and going and meeting with powerful people, leadership, and learning for myself that no, it was all engineered, all orchestrated, and it was banker priests who were essentially globalist banker priests, who were really the progenitors of all the wars of ages, the Sabbateans. It took me a long time to understand how this plays out, and the real arcane history behind blood economy and scarcity economics, which is the foundation for war and disease and poverty, which in and of itself only describes the means by which the satanic echelon and the lower elemental astral intelligences literally feed and harvest off the prana, the life force of humanity, and that ultimately has been the sacrificial wheel for thousands of years. It's the hyperdimensional parasitic element that literally sucks the life force out of us, whether it's through wars or in hospitals and or football stadiums or classrooms where kids are literally having the joy and the bliss beaten out of them whilst they're sublimating their true creative expression, being mind fucked into abnegating their true sovereignty and their true calling. And then, of course, that transposes itself into one's so-called career or vocation or goddamn job, where you have to go and give up your time and motion and energy in return for coin. And that coin you have to pay back to Caesar, or Caesar penalizes you and ultimately kills you. It's an insane cycle, but it's a sacrificial harvest. And people are so caught up in it that they very rarely see that they are the ones who are granting all the permissions for those invisible contracts which harvest ourselves and our children.
Intuition. You had an intuition. Many people had an intuition about all of this, the pandemic, the pantomime, as you say. Why are certain people awake and aware? Is it because of past lives? Is it because of your lineage? Is it because certain people are called? Is it the 144,000? And there are certain ants that are literally taken over by a parasite. They're called zombie ants. And I relate everything to nature because I traveled the world and compared animal and human behavior. So I see it playing out in nature. In the wild, there is it's a microorganism that's able to recognize the brains of different ant species and release its mind-controlling chemical cocktail only on the preferred host. Okay, not all the ants, but only on the preferred ants. So, okay, awesome. Are we the preferred ants? Are they the preferred ants? What the fuck is happening? Why some people wake up and some people don't? Because my entire family took the vaccine, all of them. And my dad was one of the top surgeons in America who always told me, don't take the vaccine, don't take antibiotics, let your body fight off in a natural way. And it's a mind fuck for me right now, because now they can't get enough vaccines. Just give them a needle. We want some heroin while you're at it. My question is, why are certain people waking up? And how do we handle the mind fuck of the ones we love that brought us up, the friends, the family, is it really the separation of 144,000 or the tears and the tares and the wheat and tares? What is it?
Well, in the first instance, I'll just correct you. The number is not 144,000, it's 144,100. And it's very important that 100,
Wow.
that's what takes the 144, 100 to the fulmination, which is 10. Look, and that is a threshold that describes the precise fractal geometry of civilizational fulmination in the alchemization process. Now, with that 144,100 fully actualized Homo sapien,
Okay.
when that threshold event occurs, and those 144,100 humans have fully actualized their psionic capacitance in the gut, and that is flamed, created a bandwidth, a frequency bandwidth around the earth, which you could describe as genetic or morphogenesis.
Okay.
That is what will activate the noosphere, which will dispel the activation of the noosphere, is what will dispel the fallen light of Atlantis, so to speak, which is the mutant light coding that is preventing this entire plane of existence from moving into its higher expression. So it's a desperately important mathematic and fractal mathematic. But to answer the greater question that you're asking about, what is it? What is it that is bringing about this extraordinary bifurcation and dystopia, which is breaking families and communities and society and culture itself?
Yep.
What the answer to that is, it is divine geometry is playing out. Whether we like it or not is immaterial. Whether it feels comfortable or not is not material. What is material is that it is the perfect geometry of now. And the capacity or the degree to which we can bear witness without identifying with those processes, but simply acknowledge and exceed the fact that everything is perfect always, in all ways. And only our capacity to bear witness to that fact is what will, give us the succor that we need to be able to navigate the sadness or the tragic comedy of life at the moment. And secondly, it'll be the thing that really lifts us into our own higher expression. Once you have learned the art of disidentifying psycho-emotional attachment to things, to events, to circumstances, to relationships, once you've learned the art of literally surrendering or negating psycho-emotional identification, you can begin the process of discovering bliss and euphoria. And it sounds like it sounds crazy to say that, because most people are dream spelled into believing that we ought to be psycho-emotionally affixed and connected to each other, always desperately concerned about each other's. No, absolutely not. This is how we feed the false matrix. We have to really just stop identifying with that nonsense if we want the entropic values, which is the destructive values in our DNA. If we want to stop that and apprehend it, we must change absolutely the paradigm by reversing or withdrawing the psycho-emotional identification to anything ever.
And this is what confuses me, because the more I've woken up, the first time I had that, pop your conspiracy cherry, whatever, it was 9/11, of course. And then the next one was the Mandela effect, like 2012, and this particle accelerator that turned on 17 miles underground, but no one's going to teach kids about this. No one talks about it. I had to find out about CERN myself. And then all of these people have one memory of Nelson Mandela dying in jail. And other people say, no, of course he didn't die in jail. And thousands and thousands of examples of the Mandela effect. It's way more American than, but now there's biblical verses where the lion shall lay down with the lamb is now the wolf shall dwell with the lamb. And I'm sorry, I'm an animal person, and I am I memorized that verse, the very first verse I ever met. My mom was a minister, everyone in my family is a minister or a doctor. And I know it was the lion shall lay down with the lamb. And now it's nowhere in the Bible. So that freaked me out. And I'm like, is it so malleable that we are now able to see the changes in biblical references? And is it because of CERN?
CERN describes part of it. Please understand that CERN is the most explicit multilateral scientific experiment or engagement that is fucking up with the fabric of time space.
That's absolutely
but it's
right.
only the most explicit multilateral experiment. There are a great many other invisible ones that you know nothing about, we know nothing about, and those are connected to black operation budgets. So who knows? Look, the fact of the matter is that stargates, jump gates, all of this stuff have existed and pre-existed for millions and millions of years. There is nothing new under the sun. Sit on the grass, look at your navel, and just reflect on those words. There is nothing new under the sun. And again, I say, it is not about how much we can fixate on the weirdness of dystopia.
Right.
That will not help us navigate the dystopia. It is the degree to which we can bear perfect witness and in a state of having removed psycho-emotional attachment to the dystopia that we will transmute and transcend the dystopia. So do we wish to continue to inhabit a twilight zone? No, because beyond a certain point, it doesn't feel good. In which case, bear witness, learn to step into the I am, which does not judge anything. It's not there wittering and wheezing and gossiping and taking notes and accusing and playing into the theater of life. It's simply bearing witness and going, wow, this civilization is in a tailspin. This planet is in an absolute psycho-civilizational meltdown. Wow, the planetary public health administration and the multilateral governance sectors have now gone into conspiracy against the living souls and are trying to now genocide their own species through a perverse satanic version of logic and governance. Wow. How bizarre is that? You see, one can play into it by putting one's prana, life force, into the theater, or you step back in a state of witness in the I am and see the calamity for what it is without any judgment. The 144,100 are going to be the ones who can bear witness without judgment. That's your actualized human right there. So I'm the wrong person to ask on these questions about Mandela effect and so on. Of course, I understand them. Yeah. I've understood them for years. But it's not the point. The point is I will not be drawn into the dystopia or the hysteria. Yeah.
And this is the dichotomy of, I think, what many people are experiencing. And I was called out by one of my friends tonight, and he said, okay, stories. We're talking about stories. Even on Facebook. Ooh, post your story. What is your story? Well, my story, I can tell you the story today, what happened to me, and I can tell you a different version, and it could be both true. And we have to look at our stories and how much are we attached to them. So now the ultimate question, I think, is